This was a scene of constant tension, where religion, politics, and geography were entangled in endless conflicts. In this context, the Ottoman Empire was perceived as a fearsome and dominant power, stretching from the east to the Balkans. Its expansion toward the heart of Central Europe was progressive and devastating, to the point of turning Hungary into a permanent battlefield. The first turning point came in the year 1526, when at the Battle of Mohacs, the young King Louis II of Hungary and Bohemia died in battle against the forces of Suleiman the Magnificent, leaving the throne without heirs. In the midst of this power vacuum, a struggle emerged between Ferdinand I of Habsburg, brother of Emperor Charles V, and John Zapolya, voivode of Transylvania. While Europeans fought among themselves, the Turks took advantage of the chaos. In the year 1541, they captured Buda, dividing the city by the Danube River into Buda and Pest, and placing them under Ottoman control for more than a century. This occupation was a constant threat to the Christian peoples of Europe. Although there were periods of peace and truce, the rivalry with the Ottoman Empire never disappeared. Everything changed in the year 1683 with the outbreak of the Great Turkish War. The Turks, led by the Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa, launched an ambitious attack against Vienna, the jewel of the Habsburg monarchy. This was not the first attempt. As early as the year 1529, Suleiman had already failed before Vienna's walls. But now, more than 150 years later, the Ottomans were returning with a colossal army of 200,000 men. The second siege of Vienna was brutal. For 2 months the city was subjected to constant bombardment, hunger, and disease. Its fall seemed inevitable. But an unexpected turn occurred. The arrival of the Polish monarch John Sobieski III, with his legendary cavalry, changed the course of history. The winged hussars reversed the outcome of the battle. These riders, with their striking feathered wings, carried out a devastating charge that shattered the Ottoman army at the Battle of Kahlenberg. The Ottoman defeat at Vienna was a tremendous blow. Pope Innocent XI, convinced that the moment had come to recover the lost lands, formalized the Holy League in the year 1684. This alliance, composed of the Holy Roman Empire, Poland, Venice, and other Christian states, had a clear objective: the expulsion of the Ottoman Empire from Central Europe. The next step in the campaign was Buda, a strategic enclave symbolizing Ottoman rule over Hungary. Soldiers and adventurers from all across Europe gathered for the siege of Buda. Among them were 12,000 Spaniards who responded to the Pope's call. These volunteers were men who saw this campaign as a religious cause. Thus began the siege of Buda in the year 1686, a siege that would test the endurance of the Christian armies and the valor of approximately 300 Spanish soldiers, whose heroic actions would remain etched in history. Before facing the imposing walls of Buda, the Christian forces captured Pest on the 17th of June, securing their positions on the opposite bank of the Danube. The siege would mark the beginning of one of the greatest feats carried out by lesser-known yet admirable figures in Spanish military history. At the climax of the siege, the feat of the 300 Spaniards revealed itself, a feat that placed them alongside the legendary Spartans at Thermopylae. The mission of these 300 men was to wear down the Ottoman defenses, breach the walls, and allow the bulk of the army to launch the final assault. It was a practically suicidal undertaking. Leading the Spaniards was Manuel Diego López de Zúñiga, Duke of Béjar, a 30-year-old nobleman whose determination and leadership inspired his men. At his side stood notable figures such as the Count of Escalona and nobles such as Moran or Servent. On the 13th of July in the year 1686, the Spaniards led the offensive, armed with muskets, swords, and the weight of the military tradition of the Spanish tercios. They advanced toward the walls under the deafening fire of the Ottomans, entrenched within the fortifications, who unleashed a torrent of projectiles. The battle turned into a hell of gunpowder, blood, and steel, where every inch of ground was paid for with countless lives. In the heat of the fighting, the Duke of Béjar himself was mortally wounded by a musket shot. The bravery of the 300 Spaniards was not in vain. They managed to breach the walls, allowing the Allied forces to advance and consolidate their positions. Despite the heavy losses, this sacrifice inspired the rest of the Christian army. The image of those Spanish soldiers who did not submit to death and fought to the very end spread as a symbol of heroism and devotion. the sacrifice of the Spaniards raised the morale of the Christian troops, proving that victory was possible. On the 27th of July, the Allied forces managed to secure the breach and prepared for the final attack. At last, after 3 months of siege, on the 2nd of September, Buda fell into the hands of the Christian coalition. The fall of Buda marked a turning point in the Great Turkish War and in the history of Europe. After 145 years of Ottoman occupation, the liberation of the city symbolized the beginning of the decline of the Ottoman Empire in Central Europe and the consolidation of the power of the Holy League. In Rome, Pope Innocent XI ordered all church bells to ring in unison for 1 full hour in honor of the victory. The liberation of Buda was not merely a military victory, but also a moral and spiritual triumph for the Christian world, which had fought with fervor to drive the Ottoman Empire from one of its most strategic enclaves. The capture of Buda became a decisive moment in the war. Strengthened by success, the Christian coalition continued its advance southward, reclaiming key cities in Hungary and Transylvania. These territories, until then Ottoman feudal holdings, fell almost without resistance, allowing the Habsburgs to consolidate their control over the region. The war ended with the signing of the Treaty of Karlowitz in the year 1699, an agreement that sealed the first major defeat of the Ottoman Empire. Over the course of centuries, the Turks ceded vast territories to the Christian coalition, especially to the Habsburgs. This treaty established the authority of the Austrian dynasty as one of the great European powers. The actions of the 300 Spaniards and the sacrifice of their leader, Manuel Diego López de Zúñiga, Duke of Béjar, were crucial to this victory. Stories of his bravery crossed borders, comparing him to the 300 Spartans of Leonidas at Thermopylae. The image of those Spanish soldiers who opened a suicidal breach in the walls of Buda and fought until total exhaustion became an inspiration for other armies and generations of soldiers. And yet, as with so many Spanish feats, the story of the 300 of Budapest is more recognized abroad than in Spain itself. In the year 1934, during the celebration of Spanish Week, a commemorative plaque was unveiled in Hungary on the wall of Buda. It was placed beneath 2 coats of arms of Spain, that of the Catholic monarchs and that of the Second Republic, and one of Hungary. The inscription can be read in Spanish and Hungarian. It states that the 300 Spanish heroes entered through that place and took part in the capture of Buda as testimony to living memory. The meadow where the Spanish troops camped in the year 1686 is still known today as Spanish Red or Spanish Province. The epic story of the 300 Spaniards of Budapest is one of those stories that seems to have come out of classical antiquity. Despite the importance of this feat for Spain, the episode remains silenced. In Budapest, however, the names of the 300 Spaniards remain alive in the collective memory, preserved with respect and admiration. This story deserves to be preserved and placed alongside other great feats. The courage and self-sacrifice of these men remind us that the history of Spain is full of heroes who, even far from their homeland, fought for the future of Europe. The 300 Spaniards in Budapest not only breached the walls of Buda, but also opened a glorious page in history, one that deserves to be remembered with pride and admiration. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment, give it a like and share it, so that the history of Spain can reach even more people. Your friend, Latin American History.